Hey guys, Jelica here from aprettyfix.com and welcome back to my channel. If you are brand new here, I share beginner-friendly, modern crafts, decor, and DIY ideas to up your home style. Well, today I'm actually returning to what has become a classic on my blog and what I've also shared here on YouTube, and that is beginner-friendly weaving. This time I'm actually going to be sharing with all of you guys how to do a circular weaving project. I'm going to be sharing how to do it from beginning to end. I recently did a Facebook Live tutorial on how to create a circular weaving project, much like this one, and it seemed to get a lot of attention, so I thought that you guys here on YouTube also might be interested. I share all the basic supplies that you'll need, basic techniques. It is beginner friendly through and through. I teach you how to warp an embroidery hoop, I teach you how to weave, and I also show you how to finish your circular weaving project. So if you're interested in creating something that takes you from this to this, then you'll want to check out that video. Hey everyone, it's Jelica here from A Pretty Fix. Welcome back to another Facebook Live. For those of you who are going to be joining me during the live, thanks for popping by. If you're going to be watching later on replay when I upload the video, then thanks for stopping by there as well. Today, you're actually joining me in my craft room. I've done another Facebook Live in this space, but I haven't actually crafted with you guys, so I thought, why not? I'll kind of like bring you guys in on it. Hi Conrad, hi, welcome. I'm going to be doing circular weaving today. It's actually a relatively new craft for me, so all that I've learned I'm going to be sharing with all of you. For those of you who have been following the blog for a while, you do know that I have been weaving for a number of years and I absolutely love it, and I've been doing it on a traditional sort of frame loom. But for some reason I hadn't tried circular weaving before. And so just on a whim, I decided to try it a few weeks back, and was really starting to fall in love with that process as well. So I thought, when I posted a picture of one of my recent circular weavings, it got a lot of interest and engagement. So I thought, why not share what I've learned so far? Even if it is kind of like at the beginning stages, I think all of you would probably appreciate when you're learning a new craft, all those new kind of tricks that you can learn, and all those I don't know, all those little obstacles that we all encounter when we're trying something new. So this was the circular weaving that I posted. Some of you might remember it online, and you know, it was really pretty easy to make. I would say probably the most challenging part was warping the circular loom, and I'm going to go into all of the basics in case this is like your first time weaving, so I'll sort of introduce terms very slowly, but this is the one that people seem to really gravitate towards, and so I really fell in love with it. So we're going to get into basics. I'm going to be talking about materials that you can get. Again, when you're first starting craft, you don't want to go out and spend a lot of money. You want it to be affordable because you're just testing it out. And all of the things that I'm going to suggest are affordable options, and it's really easy just to see, you know, if you like the craft or not. So we're going to talk about materials, and then we're just going to weave together. So if you're going to be watching this later when I upload the video, it's going to be accessible in my video library on the page, so you can reference it at any point when you're starting your weaving. If you're just here to just kind of watch and see you know, what happens, then kick back, grab a coffee. I've got my Tim Hortons for those of you who are Canadians. This is like our I don't know, national coffee, I think. So grab a coffee, sit back and enjoy. So first thing is first, I'm going to show you the materials that you're going to want to find. Embroidery hoop. You can get an embroidery hoop at a local craft store, Walmart, Michael's, for a couple of dollars. It's not that expensive. So this is what we're going to be using to frame the piece and also to hold everything in place. You're also going to want cotton yarn, And this cotton yarn is about 2 or 3 millimeters in thickness, but you can get a thinner one if you want at the store, at the craft store. This one is a Lily Sugar and Cream. I'm actually going to list all of the products as well. I probably should do that just so you guys know where to purchase it in case you're interested in the specific products that I'm using. But if not, I'm going to describe them as well. You're also going to be needing a needle. In this case, this is the Clover bent needle. It's a plastic needle. You can get plastic needles for, again, a couple of dollars at the craft store. They're really easy to pick up. I also have another bent needle that I normally use in my weaving, and it's I think this one's Clover. Yes, actually this one's Clover as well. It's one that some of you would probably recognize if you've been around long enough. It's another bent needle, and it's a Clover bent needle. And they're really great. I really love them because they're great to get underneath the warp strings really easily. You're not bending your wrist as much, so it goes a little bit faster. So we're going to give that a go for this live. And then you're going to want, let's see, a pair of scissors. I've got these DIY craft scissors. Any pair of scissors, kitchen scissors will do. I'm going to be using a pencil. This isn't absolutely necessary, but I'm going to be using it. I'm going to showing you why. I also have a measuring tape. The bendy ones are really good because then you can wrap it around the embroidery hoop to bend stuff. You're going to want a stick or a piece of cardboard. This one's about 2 or 3 inches in length. Looks like it's about 3 inches. This is going to be useful to you. And of course, your yarn. I think that's all that I've got. Okay, so I'm going to be using a color palette of kind of whites and tealy, bluey colors. So I've got a few different types of yarn, and any yarn will do. So if you've got acrylic yarn at home and you're just trying this for the first time, then use up your acrylic yarn and just test it out. See if this is something that you'd like to try. But this is what I'm going to be using. So, and I'll post again links to all of this. So this is Bernat cotton yarn. This is actually pretty cheap yarn, and I use this all the time in all of my weavings. And I get creams, whites, and beiges. And I love cotton because cotton is sturdy, it's flexible, it's pliable, and it's a great yarn to work with. But I also have a couple of wool options, and wool is a little bit more expensive, as you all know. So if you've got wool at home, then give it a go. If not, then I do recommend acrylic just to get you started. This is a pencil roving yarn. So roving yarn is yarn that hasn't been spun yet. This is pencil roving because they just kind of bundle the fibers to the fatness of a thick pencil. I'm also going to be using regular wool roving, this luscious teal color. I really, really love this. I don't know if it looks teal from where you're at. It's kind of a turquoisey teal, I guess. So again, this is roving, just a bundle of fiber, so it hasn't yet been spun. And I actually pulled out this fabric as well. It's just scrap fabric. I picked this up at Value Village for, again, a couple of dollars. I used it in a wall weaving, and I actually posted, now that I think of it, a blog post on how to use scrap fabrics in your weaving. And this is actually the scrap fabric that I used in that post, and I should probably leave a link in the description box for that in case you're interested in that. So that's sort of my color palette, and we're going to be sort of experimenting, to be honest. I hadn't planned it out to the letter, just you know, going to experiment a little bit. I also brought out some yarn scraps that I had that I thought, oh, this might look kind of nice as well, because I want to keep the color palette pretty simple with sort of creams and turquoisey colors and all that kind of fun stuff. So let's get into this. We're actually going to do sort of a close-up of the process, and I'm going to have you very close to my lap. So I'm going to bring you real close. We're going to get a little bit more intimate than usual, but I really want you to see the process, and we can kind of figure this all out together. So I'm going to bring you down here. Excuse me. Okay. And I'm just going to make sure that you guys can see everything. There's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. So we're going to be doing this kind of thing. So I'm going to be showing you how you warp this and then how we can weave. And I'm going to give myself just a second here because I'm going to be watching this on my laptop just to make sure that I'm actually within a screenshot. All right. Okay. So that's pretty good. I can actually see myself. There's a little bit of a screen delay, but that's okay. Okay, so basically you're going to be grabbing an embroidery hoop. This one happens to be 6 inches in diameter, and most of you have probably used an embroidery hoop, but in case you haven't, I'm just going to walk you through all of the steps. So an embroidery hoop is made up of 2 rings, and the way you'll want to do it is you're going to want to loosen the exterior ring, and that's what this is for. You sort of loosen that up, and once you do, the interior ring will pop right out. So this is what you'll have. You'll have 2 separate rings, and we're going to be setting the exterior ring aside in order to look after that interior ring. And this is the one that we're going to be warping. Now, for those of you who have been following the blog for any length of time, you know that when you weave, you're going to warp a weaving, and the warp is the framework of your weaving. So it's all of those strings that keep all of your woven strands together. So in order to do that, you're going to be creating spokes along this embroidery hoop, and those spokes are actually going to create the warp. So first thing I do, and again, this is relatively new to me, so this is what I do, and this is what I found to be the most helpful to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the actual circumference of the embroidery hoop. And I'm watching myself in the screenshot here. Excuse the blur. I really hope that this doesn't blur too much. So what I'm seeing here is I've got about 19 inches circumference. And what I plan to do with this particular project is I'm going to create spokes that are about 1 inch apart. So first I'm going to mark that. So that's, oh wait, and that's 1. That's 2, 3. It's going to be approximate, just because I want to keep some creativity in mind as well, just in case the spokes aren't. Oh, I'm going to bring it closer to myself. It looks like I'm a little off screen. Bear with me, folks, as I mark the spots. So the reason why I want to mark them is not because I want to be a perfectionist, though quite honestly, people, I do feel like I do have those tendencies. But what I did find when I was doing the spokes freehand, which a lot of other teachers online like to do, is I was finding that the spokes were a little bit off center for me, and because they were, then it didn't quite pull together as well as I think it should. So instead, I decided to measure it out so that I've got about 1 inch between all the spokes, and that's going to provide me with a nice guide. That's the first thing. The second reason why I'm going to want to have these spokes or measure out the spokes is because that's actually going to also tell me how much cotton warp I'm going to be using for the project. It's actually a really nice and useful measuring guide for me, and I'll tell you why. So I think I had 19. I think that's what we were establishing here. So I'm just going to make sure. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, so I've got 19 spokes all around. And so we're going to make sure that we have 19, well, the spoke itself is basically measured by the diameter of the embroidery hoop. So I'm going to make sure that I have 19 spokes by measuring end to end here, right through the middle. And then that'll help me establish the number of spokes that I will need. Plus, I'm going to add a little bit extra because we're going to need a little extra for other purposes that you'll see. So we're going to just kind of measure that out. I'm going to see if I can set this down in a spot where you guys can see it. There we go. Okay, so I think that's probably the best spot, right next to me. So that's 1, 2, 3. I'm going to loosen that yarn. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Loosen the yarn again. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 more just for good measure. So 20, 21. Okay, so I'm going to cut that off. And that hopefully will establish enough yarn. So we'll see. I mean, we're going to experiment a little bit because really this is, like I said, it's a new craft for me, and the warping is probably the hardest part. So this is where this little stick comes into play. This is going to help us to guide the spokes as we create them. So I'm going to wrap them around this just to, oh wait, before I do that, I'm going to tie it just to give it a little bit of an anchor because we want to do that. So first things first, you'll want to tie that up and make it sort of align with one of the spots that you just marked. There we go. That's going to be helpful. Then you're going to grab your stick. And again, it just happens to be a little dowel that I happen to have on hand that I'm using. And you can just grab any stick that's kind of small enough that you can hold in your hand like this, and then that'll be very helpful. 4, 5. And when I'm wrapping, what I found to be most helpful is to kind of wrap back and forth, but not to take up the entire stick. That's really important because as you use up more and more of this yarn to warp the circle, it's going to start to slip off the edges. So you just want to be very careful to give yourself a lot of space. So that'll be very helpful. Okay, so we've got this wrapped. So this is sort of the interesting part. So I want to make sure that I'm on camera here perfectly. Okay. And so what I do is I just anchor it against my expanding belly. Let's face it, you get to middle age and you've got a little extra cushion in the middle here. So I anchor it against my belly, and this is going to be very helpful. So when you warp this circle, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be wrapping it around, but you're going to be wrapping it in a very particular fashion. So let me see if I can angle this right. Okay. So what you do is you actually go down into the embroidery hoop itself. So you're not going to go over, you're actually going to be going down into it, and you're going to unroll the stick as you go along, and then you're going to wrap around. Let's see, I just want to make sure we've got a semi midpoint. Okay, so that's probably a semi midpoint. It looks like it's between the 2 markings, so that way I've got a bit of a guide. And then you're going to go up. Now what I do for this is I actually twist it until I'm back at the belly point, and I will then feed the stick down again. And then I'll come back up. Okay? So you're going to be going down and up, down and up. So with my right hand, I'm going to be feeding it. With my left hand, I'm going to actually twist it, go back down, and then twist back up. Okay? So what I find easiest is just kind of hold it with your finger, untwist it with your hand, twist it back, and then feed it down. And you're always going in one direction to create those spokes. Okay? And so for me, I go down and then to the right, and then I go back up, and then I twist. Okay? Down, back up, and then I twist, and then I do the same thing. So down, back up, turn it, and then go back down. Okay? And at this point, because what you're trying to do is make sure that this is as centered as possible, I like to kind of go back to it and just make sure that it's not too far off. So I kind of see it's drifting a little bit that way. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to move the spokes over just a little bit, just so it's more or less centered. And then that'll get me back on track. This again is probably the most difficult part, is just getting this right. And I'd say once you get this right, then it goes smoothly after, because then you just get to weave the project. And then I go back down, and then go up. So I'm always going down and taking it to the next notch to the right. Now if you happen to be left-handed, then you'll be doing the opposite. You'll be holding the stick with the yarn in your left hand, and then you'll be twisting it in the opposite direction. Okay? So this is kind of the cool part, you know, like it's a bit of a mathematical test, but also, you know, it's a way to kind of learn how to kind of steady your hand a little bit and take your time. I do find with this part that I really have to take my time, because I am so used to just whipping up a warp, and this is not, you cannot just whip this up, at least in my opinion, especially when you're first starting out. Okay, so we're almost done. So at this stage, I've kind of gotten all the way around, and what you'll see is this is actually the starter string. Okay, so you can tell that it's the starter string because it's the one that I knotted at the beginning. And what you'll notice with all of these spokes is that they're actually double spoked, right? So you've got 2 spokes per section. This is the only one that remains a single spoke for now. Okay, so at this point, before you join up the last spoke, before you kind of double spoke, as it were, you're going to want to bring all of these warp strings together into a single point. And this is what is going to actually create a lovely little warp. Because right now you're thinking, well, how the heck do I weave this? Well, you're going to have to bring all this together first before you do. Now this part is also a little bit tricky, I find. So what you need to do is you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go down, But instead of taking that string up, you're actually going to pull it. And as you pull, the warp strings start to come together. Okay? So I'm going to go up again because I want to tighten that. I want to bring it into kind of a closer, see, as you tighten, it comes together. Now I could actually, let me just take a look at the back here. I could actually take this back up and finish if I wanted to, or if I felt like the spokes weren't together enough, then I could take this sideways and bring them together again. So let me just see if I do that. I kind of like the way this looks, but I might want to create an even tighter look. Just want to be careful. If not, I might just bring that back. And then let me just test this out first. Well, yeah, maybe. I'm gonna unfurl that. And then I might, let's see, bring that together. And then I'm gonna bring that up through again. And then, yeah, I think that works. It tightens it up a bit more. I probably didn't need to, but I think it tightens it up. So then once you pull it up again, make sure that your string is in a position to then just meet up with that last string. Okay, so in this case, let's just see if I can, that guy should be on the outside. So then I have to go back down just like I did before, and then I'm going to bring it back up and I'm going to tie that together. Okay, so one thing I'm going to say as well when you're doing this, and is that you're going to want to make sure that the number of warp strings are uneven. So what I mean by that is, in this case, I happened to measure 19 inches, and I was able to mark off 19 points of the spoke. So that's great. That was an uneven number. If it had been 18, if I were doing 1 inch, if I were kind of creating 1 inch spokes, then I would have adjusted that so that I would have added an extra spoke or had one less. And the reason for that is because what you'll find, oh, my cat Burger is actively seeking my attention, so he might come in the shot, everybody. Hi there, little one. What's up? What's up? Oh, sweetie. If you have an even number, then sometimes that process of joining these spokes up just doesn't seem to work. You're not able to double up with that last spoke. And I don't really know why exactly. I still have to kind of figure that one out. But it has to do with the positioning of that last spoke that you create. So you know, you might want to do a little more research on that, as I had to. But yeah, make sure to create an uneven number. So this is what you'll end up finding. So it's actually not too bad. I would say this isn't as centered as it could be. And what I found, there's a little bit of a trick to that. This is my little hack. You can actually position it a little bit by just, you know, pushing at the spokes just a tiny bit, just to kind of get it to, you know, center a bit more. So I sometimes will go back and finagle it. I tried that on a couple of different ones that I've been working on, and it seemed to work. So see, already I was able to kind of center this a bit more. So this is kind of where it's at, slightly more centered. So voila, this is our warped embroidery hoop. And again, once you get this down, you're good to go. You will have mastered warping your embroidery hoop. Okay, so then what I like to do is actually just get the exterior hoop back on. I'm going to loosen this up a bit more. because that is going to, oh wait, this isn't even. There we go. That's not too bad. Yeah, and you might want to then reposition some of the spokes just a little bit, just so it's to, to a point where you feel like they're relatively evenly spaced. I don't worry too much about that. It doesn't have to be perfect, because I do like the look of a weaving that has some imperfections to it. So then you're going to want to reattach the external hoop, and that's pretty easy. You just attach it and then tighten the screw at the top, and then you're good to go. Oh goodness, I gotta hold on to that. And so this does two things. It kind of frames it and also will hold these strings in place. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to start, when you start in the center, and this is where you're going to weave, you're actually going to weave starting in the center, and you're going to work your way around. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. Because when you take a look at the spokes, you have a lot more space along the circumference than you do between the spokes here closer to the center point. And because of that, you're going to want to have maybe some thinner yarn along the middle, and then you can use some thicker yarns out here. That's because the thinner yarn will then kind of collapse into the center a little more easily. So that's what I like to do if I'm using this as a straight kind of circular woven piece. So I'm going to grab the Bernat Handicraft cotton yarn for that. And I honestly, because this is a bit of an experiment, we're just kind of working on this together, I really don't know how much I'm going to grab. I'm just going to grab a bundle and just cut it off. And for this, I'm going to be using this bent needle, which I really love. And you can actually find all of my weaving supplies listed on my website. There's actually, when you go to my website at prettyfix.com, at the top along the navigation bar, it says shop, and then you can find my weaving supplies. That's what the page is called. And on that you can find where to get this needle. I really love it. I've been using it for quite a long time, and I do find it very, very useful for all of my weaving. Okay, so I'm going to move this way just so you guys can see this a bit more. So let's see, what are we going to do? We're going to weave as normal. And the first thing I do like to do normally is just to start, just to kind of anchor the piece. Let me see, which side do I like better? I think that side. So I'm going to use this as, this is kind of like the back. So I'm just going to tie this to the back just to anchor it a little bit. It's not entirely necessary, but I am a little bit obsessed with making sure that something is finished properly. So a big part of that process is making sure that, you know, woven ends aren't going to pop out and all that stuff. And that way it's nice and secured. So I just tied it to the back, that way I don't have to worry about that too much. So we're going to start in the middle, and we're going to use each of these double spokes. We're going to treat each of them as a single strand. So you're actually going to just make sure that you weave around that. So for this, for those of you who have never woven before, weaving is just going up over a warp strand and then back down. And then you just repeat the process. So now we're just going to start at the top of this spoke, and then we're going to go down under the next spoke, and then up over the next, down, up, down, up. So I can only get so far in this circular weaving, which would be, you know, very different if I were, let's say, using like a regular loom. where you can just sort of go zip across and it's all good. It's all a learning process, folks. It's all good. And so you're going to do that. I don't want to pull too tightly, but just tight enough that I can get my fingers in and just push the yarn into the center point. And then we're just going to keep going. So much like regular weaving, for those of you who are weavers, you just go up and down, up and down. Now this is the part that will take a little bit of time just to kind of fill in that interior portion, but I do like the idea of using kind of thinner yarn so that it does fill in nicely, and you're not having to worry too much about you know, being able to see through the spokes. You just want it to be filled in. So and I don't know how much I'll do of that, but we'll just kind of take it as it comes. And again, this is not going to be perfect. It's going to be an experiment. You and I are experimenting today. You and I are experimenting. Okay. And there's the next bit of the project. You can also use your fingers if that's something that you'd like to do. Here you go. This might be a bit easier. It doesn't really matter how you weave. You can use your fingers, you can use a needle. I do find for this kind of thing, it's good to use a tapestry needle because it's such a fine yarn, and it does make weaving it in just a little easier. See, look at this. I'm already learning something new, which is make sure that the yarn is coming out to my right, because I'm right-handed, and this will be a lot easier to kind of pull that yarn along. And see, it's kind of filling it in the interior portion right there. Okay. So we're going to do this a few more times, up and down some of these spokes to keep filling it in. Now, if you guys are brand new to weaving, you've never woven before, and you're just curious about the circular weaving, then you can certainly go to some of my introductory blog posts, which go over all the materials that you need, what is weaving, basic terminology, all that kind of fun stuff. And this will really help you as well. But you don't need to. You can certainly learn a few basics from this Facebook Live. But I would say with my blog posts, I do cover a lot more. And you can learn a lot more through a quick kind of visual guide, and that'll then prepare you for maybe experimenting with some of these circular weavings that we're going to be doing. And I might do a few more on Facebook Live. Who knows where this will lead. But I do like the idea of just experimenting, and I often do that on my own in my craft room, but it's kind of fun to do this with you guys and share how I'm moving along here. Again, this is just an experiment, so it's fun to kind of see where this goes. And once you do it a couple of times, then you kind of figure out which kind of materials you like most. Do you want to go large scale? I did share a Facebook post recently on a beautiful large-scale circular weaving project done by an artist, a fiber artist, who, that's her bread and butter. Is she does a lot of weaving, but she does a lot of circular weaving and large-scale pieces, just beautiful large-scale pieces. And I'm definitely a great admirer of that. I do a lot more frame loom weaving, as you know, but you know, it's fun to experiment and see what pops out on the other side. So I'm liking how this is kind of turning out. It's a fun way to explore circular weaving, and I want to be able to, this is my goal, I want to be able to get this down to a comfortable level where, you know, it just warping it comes really easily, and just weaving in the round, as they call it, comes really easily. The weaving part isn't so bad. I mean, it takes a little finagling, as you can see, but you know, and then I have these ideas, experiments that I want to use, and that I'll share with you guys. But this is fun in the meantime. So one thing that you should keep in mind when you are weaving in the round, much like regular frame loom weaving, when you're using a regular, you know, rectangular frame, you don't want to pull the yarn too tightly when it gets into the warp. So when you're pulling along here, you don't want to pull so much that it sort of pulls on everything else. You want to leave a little bit of slack, just a little bit. So you pull out enough so that you've got, you know, some slack available, and then you want to then push it back in, because you don't want to end up creating a lopsided appearance. In this case, I'm not going to be removing the frame. I'm not going to be attaching it to anything. The frame will keep it in place, but it's really important for the overall appearance of your piece that your actual strings, or your yarn is woven in a way that provides texture and beauty, and it's not just, you know, this really tightly woven piece. Okay, so every once in a while I kind of look up at my laptop just to make sure I'm within frame. So hopefully I'm in that frame, and hopefully you're getting a bit of an idea. I am going to be doing a blog post and probably a YouTube tutorial where I can actually get in even closer, and you'll be able to get the idea. But in the meantime, I thought this might be a good kind of primer, just to see in real time what weaving in the round can look like. So I'm leaving a little slack, and then I'm just pushing it in with my tapestry needle, and I'm really loving the way this looks. One thing that I want to mention as well, what I noticed, for those of you who use the same Lily Sugar and Cream cotton yarn that I do recommend for regular frame loom weaving, I do have a link to that again on my weaving supplies page on my website. For those of you who use that, this is that Lily Sugar and Cream. What I have noticed is that because the Lily Sugar and Cream is a little bit thicker, it's about 2 to 3 millimeters, which I like. It works for all of my other weavings that I do. It's just perfect for me. For circular weaving, what I found was it sometimes can feel a little bit bulkier in the middle here. And so what I'm actually considering doing is getting maybe a 1 millimeter thickness warp string. So getting some cotton yarn that's specifically used for weaving, but you know, cotton yarn in general. But I'm going to get maybe a 1 millimeter. So this part in the middle, the center point of these spokes, is not so bulky. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought, oh, I didn't realize that that's what would happen, but of course that's going to happen. So that's essentially what I'm planning on doing. So right now I am using the Lily Sugar and Cream, and as you can see, it works out really great. I have no complaints about it per se. But what I will try to do to see if I can make this a bit finer in the center is using a thinner warp string that can create a bit of a finer look, and so it won't be as lumpy in the middle, that it would probably be a little bit flatter. At least that's my theory. Maybe some of you have a different theory. Okay, I think I might go around maybe one more time, and then we're going to move on to using a different kind of yarn. We've got lots of space for it, and once we get into that roving, you know, that fluffy stuff is just going to take up a lot of space. So I want to make sure I do have options to use different types of yarns. Okay, so I think this should be okay. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to go, because this is my front, I'm going to go down to the back, and I can either just leave it, and then when I start weaving in the other pieces, it'll get packed down. But I don't always like to just leave it. I always like to weave the last bit in again. And I've got a lot left over, so I'm just gonna cut some off, and I'm gonna weave the ends in. Now, a lot of folks like to weave the ends at the end of the project. I'm not a big fan of that because it is so tedious. I've done that before, where I have left it at the end, and honestly, it's okay. Like, you can do that if you prefer to kind of continue on. But what I have found is there's so many pieces to weave in, and it's not as fun. So what I like to do is I just weave it in at the back, just take it through a few. Here we've got like 2 or 3 pieces of yarn. I'm going to move it up, and I don't know if it'll focus. It's hard for me to tell, but I actually will then weave it back in, and then I will cut the end off right here. And that way it's fairly secured, and you won't see it on the back, and easy peasy lemon squeezy. So that's what I like to do. But you can also tie it to the warp string like I did at the beginning, and then, you know, you won't see it. So that's basically what it's looking like so far. Really pretty straightforward. I used the same color as I did with the warp string, but I didn't necessarily use the same yarn. This is Lily Sugar and Cream. This is Bernat. They're both cotton. The colors are very similar, and that's probably a nice way to start if that's your jam. You can also use a different color to create contrast, which I think would be a very cool thing to do as well. Okay, so that would be the first thing. I'm going to bring this close, make sure you can see it. That would be the first thing that I would do. And then grabbing another yarn, I would then go thicker. So this is just my suggestion, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's, the be all and end all of how you do circular weaving, because as you know, crafters, fellow crafters, you just experiment. So I like the idea of starting off with a thinner yarn just to kind of fill this in, and then move on to using maybe something thicker. And you can kind of go back and forth, thin, thick, as you build on this, but I like just to start that off just so it can be filled in. So now I'm going to be taking this pencil roving, and let me just see again, I think I'm going to double up on it. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Oh, this is fun. I love weaving. If you love weaving, guys, then you definitely got to try this. This is something that'll really kind of take up your enjoyment of weaving up a notch. except the warping part. I have to say, I still can't get over how, for me anyway, for some of you, if you've done circular weaving, you probably think, oh goodness, Jelica, that is just the easiest thing in the world. But for some reason, I don't find it all that easy. So I'm going to double this up, and I'm going to weave in that way. So you can do this as well. This is another fun way to do it. You don't have to stick to just the yarn as is. You can double it up, triple it up. I've done all sorts of different projects, different ways, and you're good to go. So I'm going to be using this other tapestry needle, which has a larger eye, and it just makes feeding it through a lot easier. And oftentimes, I don't always remember to do it, but I like to tie it just so it doesn't slip off, because it's prone to slipping off too. Okay. So now, and I do that for no particular reason really. It just kind of keeps everything doubled up and together. So what I'm going to try is I'm going to start at some point, again, from the bottom going up. But I'm going to find a spot, let's see. So this spoke, you can't really see very well, but I'll explain what's going on here. So for this spoke, I've got yarn that's gone over this spoke or this warp string. Okay, it's gone over this one and it's gone under this one. So you always want to start on the opposite end when you're starting a new row. So if it's gone over this one and under this one, then I'm going to want to go over this. This is the one where it's gone under. So I want to go the opposite way. So you're always so as if you're weaving as if you are continuing the process of going over one string and under the other. So right now I'm just going to leave a big old tail at the bottom, because at the moment I don't really know what to do with it, and I'm just going to hang on to it with my other hand, and I'm just going to continue on as usual. Okay, so we're going to go over one warp string, under another, over one, under another. Okay, and then we're going to bring this to the other side. And I've learned that new hack where I'm going to make sure that I always turn it so that I can pull on the yarn. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. That's better. Ooh. So, okay, now I'm going to let go of this tail at the bottom. And again, I'm going to leave a tiny bit of slack because I don't want it to be too tight, and I do want there to be a kind of pretty texture too. And then I'm just going to push the yarn into the middle like that. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I could weave with my fingers if I wanted to, but because I've got quite a bit of yarn here, I'm going to continue in this case using a needle, and this is that plastic needle from Clover, this bent needle, which again you can kind of see where that bent part comes in handy. It actually makes it much easier to feed it through. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then pull that along, and then slow it down when I get to a part where I think, okay. And this is the fun part of, this is one of the reasons why I love weaving. There's unexpected things that'll happen. So see how this kind of looped out? You know, I kind of like that. I kind of like that it sort of looped out and created some interesting texture. So I'm going to leave it. If you don't like that, let's say you've decided to double up, you can always go back and kind of pull on it. But you know, I'm going to leave that because I just think that's adorable, and that's what makes weaving so much fun, is you just never know, you know, what you're going to find. And I personally love a lot of texture in my weaving, but I've also done some beautiful kind of flat color block patterns that I have shared on the blog, and those are always really beautiful too. But in the case of this project, I definitely want to be creating some texture. And so we're gonna, oh, and I'm really liking how that's turning out. So we're just gonna keep going with that. So going up and down, up and down. Pull on that. And then we're gonna pull. And this is the part where you just have to kind of finagle, I think, a little bit, just to make sure that things don't get caught. Things don't get caught. And you can choose to, you know, leave even more slack or less slack, as long as there's a little bit of slack. But if you leave more slack, you can create more bubbles, more texture. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to do a little bit of a, just follow me here, folks. I'm going to be doing a little bit of an abstract off-center kind of look. So what you can do is you can continue going round and round, just as we did before, or you can just kind of weave in sections. Kind of do like a bit of doodle weaving, as it were, kind of like doodle drawing. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to doodle here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create kind of a section of woven pieces, and so I won't go all the way around, so I'll show you. So let's see, I'll go up and down and maybe take it to this part. That's the fun with weaving. Like once you kind of get the basics, then you can play around a little bit. So I'm just going to give you just a couple of tricks in case this is kind of like your first time. So instead of continuing on, I'm actually going to go back, and I'm going to stop at another point and then go maybe back up again, just to create kind of like an off-centered appearance. But you don't have to do that. You can continue going in a circular pattern. Now the important thing is, again, you just continue to go up and down your warp strings. And then create some interesting patterns. So this is kind of, you know, you can call this, again, I'm leaving a bit of slack. You can use your fingers to push it. You can use the tapestry needle. I'm going to go, let's see, one more. Yes, I'm going to go one more, just that, over that one. So I'm actually going to go over that one and then back. And I'm going to just create some interesting little designs here. Let's push that back in. And I'm going to try to meet up to that point because that's where I started reversing the process in the first place. Okay, and then I'm going to go, let's see, I might go back again, maybe just for good measure, or let me just see. Okay, I'm just going to go back. See, I decided to change my mind about ending up here. All I have to do is just bring that yarn back up, and that way I can start at the previous spoke. So I'm just going to end at this spoke instead of that spoke for the next one. I guess I'm just going to try to peter it out, as it were. See where this lands us. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so I think I'm just going to end right here. I might need this later, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think, okay, so let's say I decide to end that here. So it's going to be a little off center. We're going to be doing some other things, filling something else in here. So then on the back, I'm just going to finish that. So I'm going to chop that off. None of this yarn goes to waste. I always like to keep some on hand for little projects like this. I've got quite a bit left over, so I'm just going to set that aside. And I'm going to weave this in right away. Again, I'm not a big fan of waiting to the end because it just, at the end, you just want to finish the piece, hang it up, and move on to something else. So I'm just going to then weave it in, back in kind of towards the center of the spoke, underneath the same color. You're gonna go along a warp string. That probably is the easiest way to look at it. And I'm just gonna weave that in the direction of a warp string, and then I just cut that off. And it's nicely it's a neat finish to that. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. Okay, so we're going to find a spot. So in this case, I have nowhere to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, because this is the back end anyway, I'm going to follow, let's see, follow the trail. And here's a spot. I'm going to weave it in here. Maybe grab a couple of pieces. No, I have to grab this one. I don't want to get in the way there. I'm just going to weave it into this one spot right here, just to anchor it a little bit, and then maybe find another random spot. I just don't want to interfere with the pattern here. I want to make sure that it doesn't show through, which is why I choose the same color to weave it through. And that should work. And that's the back, and you can see like the little bits that have woven through. But on this side, the pattern remains the same. Just sort of this weird off kilter kind of design right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm thinking it would be really nice to try this. I had this kind of leftover yarn, so I don't know. We might try this leftover yarn, or I could try to use this material and try to use this and kind of weave it in a little bit. Maybe I'll start with this thicker yarn first and kind of basically do the same thing, just weave back and forth right here until this kind of circle returns, and then we're going to use that thick, beautiful roving for the next part of that piece. Okay, so I'm just gonna eyeball this, see how much I might need. I'm gonna grab some of this. Okay, so I think, oh, this whole piece might work. Okay, so with this, I'm gonna just show you how you might weave with your fingers. So if you have, oops, sorry guys, if you've never woven before, then you'll want to experiment with using your fingers, also using tapestry needles. So, you know, either one can work. So in this case, we're just going to try it with our fingers, and I'll show you it's just the same principle. So I'm going to find a spoke and figure out whether or not I need to go over or under that spoke. In this case, the spoke is exposed, so it means that the blue yarn or the teal yarn was going under that. So I'm going to start here, and it'll be the spot where I go over. So I'm going to go over that and under the next one, over this one, under that one, over, under, over. Now I can keep going, but because it's a circle, I have to give myself some opportunity to pull. Okay, and I'm going to leave some of that tail at the back, which I will either weave in or tie off later. We'll see. I'm going to pull a little bit just to give it some slack. Okay, so I'm going to keep going with that. So I've ended up under this warp string. I'm going to go over that one, right? So this is the basics of weaving. This is called a plain or a tabby weave, for those of you who are familiar with the terms. And those of you who are unfamiliar, that's what plain or tabby weave is all about. Again, you can create a bit of slack, which I really quite like, just to give it a bit of texture. And then you can go back the other way. That's what I'm going to do here, because I'm going to fill that in. So I'm going to twist it just to make it a bit easier for me. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Just going to refresh my page. It's sort of hard to see where I'm at, or if I'm even still filming, guys. Okay. Okay. So there we go. Don't want to pull too tightly. I want to maintain that kind of neat texture that we're already creating with this as well. And I really like the contrast between, you know, creams and colors that you can add to your weavings. So under, over, and I'm going to go under, and maybe I'll go over. Actually, I'm going to wait for that. So we're going to end under, add a little bit, make sure there's slack, and then because I'm ending under, I'm going to have to come up from behind right here and pull on that so I can start the process again. So over, under, over, under, over, under, and the circle of life continues. And one thing that you'll notice when you've got sort of thicker yarns like this one is it starts to twist. So kind of be careful, because as you're moving along, you will naturally start twisting that yarn and it'll lose some of its fluffiness. And so I will often go back and untwist it by hand, not in the actual weaving, but I will untwist the long piece, kind of twist it back, and that way you're not losing that lovely fluffiness. So I think this is as far as I really want to take this, because the spokes are getting wider, and I really like the idea of adding the thicker yarn out here, so we can maybe add some roving and then do something else there. So I'm going to stop right here. Let's see, maybe actually I'll stop right there, right at that colored yarn. I think that would be really nice. I like a little bit of symmetry as well as a little bit of asymmetry, just for fun. So we'll see how this works. And I love using, you know, different materials, different thicknesses. It always makes weaving so much fun. And the experimenting part is fun, because then you get to see what you like, what you don't like, and all that jazz. So I'm going to cut that off. And with this, it's tricky. In this case, because I have a large eye needle, I actually can feed it through, and I often do. For really thick ones, sometimes you just might need to use your fingers to delicately maybe just tuck it underneath something. But once you've got the rest woven in, it'll pack things down, so you don't have to worry too much about you know, anything unraveling. So, okay, so that guy escaped. See if we can pull him back in. Probably should have left a longer tail. So I'm going to pull a little bit on it, and then I'll loosen it up again a little bit later. So I'm just going to feed it through one right now. I don't think I need to do much else with it. I'm going to go on the other side and make sure it doesn't interfere with the design, or that it shows through. And then the same thing with this guy. This guy, I have a bit of a longer tail, so it's a little easier for me to actually weave it in somewhere. So I'm just going to find some spot to weave it in. Be careful not to ruin anything here. Let's see, that side looks okay. And I'm going to just try another spot to weave it in. And you always look for the same color. So I would never try to weave this in to the blue portion, because inevitably bits of this do show through on the other side, and you want it to be imperceptible. So when I turn it over, even if little bits do show through, you don't really want it to show through too much. If you wove it in on the blue side, then you might see the white bits, and they might look a little off, like to your eye. So, okay, so far so good. So far we've done some circular weaving using cotton yarn, and this is a great way to fill this in. Then we actually used some pencil roving right here. We did some doodle weaving here. We didn't go all the way around. And then we did some more sort of thicker pencil roving along here. Nice and fluffy kind of appearance. Now, let's see what we can do, and I might squish this in a bit more, who knows, what we can do with this lovely thick kind of roving. This is a really fun kind of yarn to use, because you can add a lot of texture. Now this is a really small piece, so we probably would only do, say, one row. I don't know, we'll see what happens. You could use, and I'll show you the original piece here. You could use a whole bundle if you've got a bigger piece, but you can also split roving up. So roving comes in these fiber bundles, and you can weave with them. Again, you would weave using your fingers. You can take the whole thing if you want, or you can split it up into certain sizes. So you just sort of take your fingers and you grab you decide, do I want to split it in half? Do I want to use a third of it? Let's say I just wanted to use a third of it. I would take the point at which I want to split it, and I then just begin pulling on it. And you can see it pulls apart quite easily. And then you can use this portion, or you can use this portion to weave. And normally I like to cut it at the point that, at the length that I want to use it at. Others will sometimes just pull it apart with their hands, give themselves a couple of inches, and the fibers naturally pull apart. But I like to cut it. It's a lot easier, a little less messy for me, because even just pulling it in half. Now, as you can see, this one I actually started pulling in half because I was using it for another project. So I've already got probably the thickness that I'd want to use, and I'm not sure if I'll be using the whole thing. I've got quite a bit here. So I'm just going to see, let's see. So I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to add maybe one, maybe two, not sure. We'll see what happens here. Okay. And I can hear somebody coming down the stairs. It's my husband. Hello, husband. I'm doing a Facebook Live. Are you leaving now? Okay, he's waving. Bye. So you can use this. So we can start anywhere, really. In this case, I'm just going to see if we can go all the way around, and we'll see how that works. So again, I'm going to start underneath. I'm going to find a spot. I'm going to find one of the spokes or the warp strings where I can go over it. So here's one that's exposed. This last row of yarn, we went under this spoke. So I'm just going to start here, and I'm going to go that way and go over that spoke. So that's what you're always trying to do, because you want to make sure that it's all woven in the same pattern. And so this is a very interesting piece. Let's see. So it's a little bit, let's see. This will happen too when you start to split the fibers up. They split in odd places. So I'm going to pull this apart. This could be used for something else. This isn't bad, actually. Not a bad thing at all, folks. So which way was I going? Oh yes, okay, so I'm going to go this way. So I'm going to pull on the entire thing until I get to kind of that tail end, and I'm going to hold it for now because I don't want it to escape. So I'm going to hold it with that hand just for the moment, and I'm going to feed this up and down a few spokes or a few warp strings just to get it started. And then I'm going to twist it, and holding that tail end, I'm going to try to pull on this gently. Now with roving, one thing that you'll want to note is that as you pull, because it's delicate, it's not, it hasn't been spun yet, and it's just a bundle of fibers. You will find that it can fray, and if you're okay with it fraying a bit, and I'm okay, because in this case I'm just creating a nice fun textured design, then just keep pulling. But sometimes you have to be really careful with it so that it doesn't fray too much. Now I love this. I think this is kind of cool. I'm just give me a second, folks. I'm gonna experiment just to see if I want it to be a little more textured. So you can kind of finagle it, pull it up a little bit so that this bounces out, and I like that look. I like it to be a bit more textured for this. So you can just pull on that, and I still have this tail. I'm still gonna hang on to this just for the moment, just so it doesn't pull out. And then I'm just gonna feed this over and under, and then I'm gonna pull right here. And again, as you can see, because we're going in a circular pattern, this is starting to thin out again. It's starting to twist up. So I always, when I know that that's happening, I will often go back in and just kind of twist it back up. And it's not, you know, a huge deal, but I like to sort of go back in and maybe untwist this portion, and maybe untwist it to an extent that it'll start to slowly twist back. So maybe untwist it more than you would normally, then you should be fine. So now here's another thing you could do. You can pull these out as much as you want. You could have some portions that are flat, other portions that are raised. It's up to you. But because this is just sort of a basics video, I just want to show you a few possibilities for your circular weaving, and for myself too, because as I said, it's a new weaving practice for me that I'm kind of excited to experiment with. And today's Facebook Live is actually one of those experiments. So it's kind of fun to see how this progresses. So again, I like it to be nice and fluffy, and that really works for me. And then kind of push it in place. Push it in place. So now at this point I can either, let's see, I can either, because this is the top of mine, I can either do another row and finish it off, or I could do a another, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to do maybe a white roving to kind of finish it off, and then we will be basically done with our crafting day together. So we'll see. Okay, so let's see, we've got this one is under, over. Oh, did I make a mistake here? Let me just check. Let me just check what we did here. So you can see I actually, for this last piece, would need to go over this one, but I'm also over this one. So that's why I'm kind of going back to see if I don't know if I made a mistake somewhere. Let's just see. So over, under, 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 over. Okay, this is blowing my mind, folks. Blowing my mind. So let me just see what I might do. Because it's not a, like once it's all woven in, it's not going to be noticeable. It's not really a big deal. But it is a curiosity. It's a mathematical curiosity to me, everyone. If somebody can figure out the math on that one, and I'm not a mathematician, my friends, believe it or not, then I would be grateful. Okay. Actually, it doesn't really matter. Okay. So then for this gets really tricky too. You know, so you think, oh gosh, I love this roving. It's so beautiful. Oh, how do I weave in these ends? This is what I do. Some people actually clip it off, they leave it, and then they continue weaving. Again, I get a little nervous about that. I like to have something woven in somewhere. And because you want to have this woven into the same color, basically into the same material that you've already used, then I normally would take something like this and go, let's see, and maybe take it and tuck it in somewhere in here. Let's see. Well, there are two things that I do. Sometimes I will tie, and this is the honest truth of it. Sometimes I will tie it together like that. And I don't know if that'll work for this, but sometimes I will tie it together, and all it does is create more texture in your weaving, and that's what I really like. In this case, it doesn't really make a big difference. So you can do that, it depends. So I've done that, and that helps to kind of secure something. In this case, what I'm going to do is, because of the double spokes, I'm going to weave it, I'm going to just try this, weave it underneath just one of the spokes, not both. Just so it's secured on the back side a bit more. And then maybe weave it, let's just see what happens here, because this will show up on the other side. I'm just going to see if I weave it underneath, the appearance of it. Actually, surprisingly, this one, I want to keep, no, not loving that, not loving that. Okay. So what we might want to do is over, under, I'm going to go back over. So I'm going to leave that as is there. And in this case, I am going to tie it because then it won't affect the opposite, the other side. You won't really see it, but it will be secured. Okay? So it doesn't really show through. In fact, once I weave the other piece in, you barely even notice that. But I'll have the security of knowing that this guy is okay. Now, I can untie this later once I've finished, but for now, I just want to make sure that this guy doesn't budge. So that's what I sometimes will do. And sometimes I will leave it like that, as long as it's nice and tight. So when I do the knot, normally it'll be a bit tighter. I'm going to leave it loose for now because I don't really know how how everything will turn out at the end once I've woven this in and this guy is a bit more hidden. So let's see what we can do here. I'm gonna get him out of the way. Okay, next I'm gonna take some off-white undyed merino wool. This is actually new. It is Ashford 19 micron merino, in case people are interested. Ashford creates, it's a well-known brand for creating looms, but they also create beautiful fibers, and this is just this lovely, lovely, you know, just beautiful fiber blend, which I absolutely love. Now my phone is talking to me. It's telling me I'm on low battery mode, so we're gonna have to make sure that we can finish this because we've got one more row, which I'm very excited about. So I'm just gonna take this again and I'm gonna split it, find a spot, and just split my yarn. Because I think this is probably a really good thickness to use. And it's kind of it's very oddly bundled, I have to say. Very oddly bundled. Maybe I have to take that off. Okay. So I'm going to split that bundle. It looks like it was a little bit weak here. So when I started splitting, it didn't split as well as I'd hoped. Okay, let's see what we can do here. All right, so let's try this again. I'm going to split, maybe have about that much. Let's see. Every time I try to split, it seems to split in a different spot. It's very tricky, this roving, but I really want to get as much as I can to make sure that I can go maybe all the way around. And I think this should do. So I've got this, and I'm just going to chop that off. That's what I do, everybody. I just chop off that roving. And then this may be the last row. So let's see what we can do. It's a little bit off here. I'm going to try to find another spot. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to take it up as far as I can. I'm going to leave a bit of a tail here. And then we're going to go do our plain weave. So down, up, and this one's a little bit more delicate. This particular roving is a little bit more delicate, so I'm just going to be a bit more careful with it. The other roving was bundled. It was less fragile, I guess is what I like to say. So in this case, I might need to just kind of more gently bring it through. See, it's already kind of getting in the way here of the other yarn. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to hold that other yarn down, try to gently bring it through. Now it's my first time using this yarn, so you know, you learn a few things when you're experimenting with a new yarn. Okay. So I'm just going to gently be a little bit more gentle with this one because it requires it. And I'm just going to keep that bundled like that. Keep it nice and, oh, I love that. Okay. Keep it nice and popcorny. So you can create a kind of a cool popcorn effect as well with your bundles of roving. So in this case, you could actually twist it one way, twist it another way, and it creates interesting texture as well. So I might end up doing that. So let's see what we can do. So it creates a kind of popcorn effect. So it's not a smooth weave, but it's a bit more textured. Okay. So we're going to do that for this last fun row. And I'm going to try to do it one at a time because I am cautious right now of the fact, or wary of the fact, that this particular roving is a little bit more delicate. And I'm also at the last row. So using roving for your last row here, you know, you might need to be a little bit more cautious so it doesn't get caught up with, say, the roving in the row beneath. And this is where you can have lots of fun. Roving is a really fun yarn. It actually makes the weaving go a little bit faster too, which is also really fun, because sometimes, you know, with thinner yarns it goes really slowly, like molasses. But with roving, you know, you can cover more warp and finish the project pretty quickly. So I really love the feeling of this particular roving. It's really smooth and just really soft. Not that the other roving wasn't, but there's a softness to this one that just is really quite lovely. So here I am at the end, and I'm going to now kind of pinch it around, pinch it, do some fun things with it. See if I want to add more texture, less texture. I kind of like the way it's all bundled and the look of it. And it's a cute piece. Yeah, so this is basically how I'm going to leave this particular piece. And I'm going to take this, and I'm either, like I said, I'm either going to see if I can weave it under somewhere, or I might just tie the ends off. In this case it's difficult because if I weave it under here, it will definitely show through on this side. So I might tie it if I can, or weave it underneath one of the warp strings where it won't show through on the other side, because I've doubled up on the warp strings. So I'm just going to experiment here, because my preference is always to weave it in. That's always a preference. It's a better finish. It's a more secure finish. So I've just put it under this warp string, and it doesn't actually show through because, again, that warp string is not the warp string on this side because we've doubled up. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to cut that off so it's secured. And then this little guy, I'm going to find another warp string here on the back. I'm going to use this one right here, right there. I'm going to feed that through underneath like that. Okay. And then make sure it doesn't show through. So that's right there. And that seems to work really well. And then I'm going to cut that little guy right off. So there's the back of the piece. So it's relatively neat and tidy. You want it to be neat and tidy. You want everything to be woven in. And then this is the front of this particular piece. This is how it basically looks. I don't know how well lit it is on your end, but this is a really deep kind of turquoise color, and these are all really fluffy. And so what you can do with this is, you know, I would cut these off, these little end pieces right off, and then take some cotton string. You can hang it up just like this, and you know, hang it up in a gallery wall or in a foyer, and you can do it lots of different ways, but sometimes you can either, let me just see. Well, I guess I can do that. You can either, sometimes I will tie it this way, and then just see. And then you can then hang it, so you can cut this piece off and you can hang it up like that, or any number of ways, but you get the idea. This is kind of one way that you can hang up your piece. But this is our finished little piece. I'm just going to bring you up here for now so you guys can see me. Hey world. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Facebook Live. I know this was a bit of a longer one, but I think it was fun to create, and I'm happy for those of you who stayed right to the end to see how this circular weaving piece turned out. I think it's super cute, and it's just a fun little way to kind of expand your weaving horizon. So if you're interested in circular weaving, then I'd say I would give it a try, and you can always use this video as a reference to see if it's something that you'd like to try as well. I'll probably be getting into the ins and outs of circular weaving later on as I learn more and more and can offer you other practical tips and tricks. But in the meantime, this is probably the most inexpensive way to start circular weaving, or weaving in the round as it's often called. And so why not give it a try? Okay guys, well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a terrific weekend. It's a little cloudy here right now, and the hair is really frizzy, which is why I have it up. But I'm gonna continue doing some more weaving tonight, and hopefully on the weekend, and maybe show you some other projects that I'm up to. And I would love to see if you guys are going to be doing some circular weaving, so please do tag me, show me your photos. I am so thrilled when I see that. I really love it. I get inspired by all of you guys. So anyway, hope you guys have a terrific day and weekend, and I will see you here on my next Facebook Live next month. Okay guys, take care. Bye-bye.